The content in this video is for general educational use. It does not represent political opinions or judgments about any country, culture, or government. Information is based on publicly available sources and may be summarized or simplified. Viewers should verify details through multiple sources.
You know, we tend to think of history as something that's over and done with, right? Just a bunch of dusty books and old dates. But what if I told you that history is actually a live battleground, a story that's being fought over right now to justify the present and to control the future? Nowhere is that more true than in the shared and fiercely contested history of Russia and Ukraine. To really get what's happening today, we've got to go back, way back. And it all kind of boils down to this one central puzzle. How on earth can one medieval prince from over 1,000 years ago be the founding father for two nations that are now locked in such a bitter, devastating conflict? It's a real head-scratcher, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack. And believe me, this isn't some abstract academic debate. It's playing out at the very highest levels. On the one hand, you've got Vladimir Putin, who talks about this shared history as this deep spiritual bond that unites everyone. For him, it's the reason they all belong together. But then you have former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, who looks at that exact same history and sees the complete opposite. For him, it's the origin story of a unique Ukrainian path, a path away from Russia. It's the same past, but two totally conflicting visions for the future. This shows why digging into this history is so important. Okay, so let's rewind. Let's go meet the man at the center of all of this, Vladimir the Great, or Vladimir as he's known in Russian. He was a 10th century prince, the ruler of a medieval state called Kievan Rus, and its capital was right there in modern-day Kyiv.
And get this, the link between his time and today is incredibly direct. The modern coat of arms for Ukraine, that famous trident symbol called the trizub, it comes straight from the personal seal of Volodymyr himself. A 10th century emblem is now the symbol of a 21st century nation. For Ukraine, that's just how deep this connection runs.
So Vladimir ruled over this place, Kievan Rus. You can think of it as this big, sprawling federation of Slavic peoples. And it's really important because it's seen as the cultural cradle, the common starting point for three modern nations, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. It's their shared inheritance.
Now, the single biggest thing Volodymyr ever did was decide to adopt a major world religion. The story goes that he shopped around a bit, sending out envoys to check out Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, in both its Western and Eastern forms. But what really blew his emissaries' way was the incredible splendor of the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. So, in 988, as part of a political deal to marry a Byzantine princess, Volodymyr converted to Orthodox Christianity. And he didn't just convert himself, he ordered all of Kievan Rus to do the same. That one moment shaped the culture and religion of this entire region for the next 1,000 years.
For centuries, Kievan Rus was a major power. But then an event came along that just shattered that shared world. It was a cataclysm that would send the future nations of Russia and Ukraine down two very different roads. I'm talking about the Mongol invasion. In the 13th century, Mongol armies just swept in from the east, and the destruction was, well, it was almost total. This quote from a chronicle written at the time really captures the horror of it. Cities were completely leveled, people were massacred. The old world of Kievan Rus was literally burned to the ground. This whole period is so pivotal that even within Russia itself, there's this huge debate about what the Mongol legacy really was. Some historians see the Tatar yoke as a total catastrophe that cut Russia off from Europe and the Renaissance. But others, they see it as a blessing in disguise. They argue the Mongols actually protected Russia's Orthodox faith from the Catholic West, and maybe most importantly, taught them how to build a powerful, centralized autocratic state. And this is really where the paths begin to fork. The heartland of Kievan Rus, including Kyiv, was just devastated. But these remote northern city-states, like Moscow, they were less affected. Their princes were clever. They actually started working with the Mongols, becoming their main tax collectors. And all that tribute money, it funneled wealth and power straight to Moscow, while the great city of Kyiv just faded away. So the crucial thing to grasp here is that Moscow didn't just inherit Kyiv's legacy, it literally rose from its ashes. Moscow's power was built on a brand new political model, one forged during the Mongol domination, and it was a world away from the old Kievan Rus. Okay, So as Moscow is growing and turning into the massive Russian Empire, the lands of the old Rus, what we now know as Ukraine, were on a totally different journey. A new identity started to emerge, and at the heart of it were these fiercely independent warriors known as the Cossacks. The 17th century was just explosive. In 1648, a leader named Bogdan Khmelnytsky led a huge uprising and carved out a semi-independent Cossack state. But he needed powerful friends, so in 1654, he made a deal with the Tsar in Moscow. Now, Russia has always called this the reunion of one people, but for a lot of Ukrainians, it was a military alliance that just went terribly wrong. And this tension all comes to a head in 1709, when the Cossack leader Ivan Mazepa gambled everything, sided with Sweden against Russia to fight for independence, and lost. And Mazepa's own words, they just show a completely different way of thinking than the absolute power that was developing in Moscow. He's not talking about his own power or dynasty, he's talking about serving the people who entrusted him with their fate. It's a different political world. So here we are again, same person, two totally opposite legacies. In the story of the Russian Empire, Mazepa is the ultimate traitor. His name is basically a curse word. But in the Ukrainian national story, he's a founding hero, a martyr who died fighting for an independent nation. So we've seen how one origin story split into two. Now let's bring it all into the present and see how these centuries-old figures and stories are being used right now as political weapons. You know, for most of the 20th century, the Soviet Union, being officially atheist, tried to stamp out all these national histories. But in 1988, that all changed. Mikhail Gorbachev allowed people to celebrate the 1,000-year anniversary of Volodymyr's conversion. He probably didn't realize it, but he was opening Pandora's box. History and religion came roaring back into public life. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the newly independent Ukraine made reclaiming its history a top priority. It wasn't just about using the trizeb symbol. They named their new currency the hryvnia, the exact same name used back in Kievan Rus. They were drawing a direct line from their modern country to that medieval state. And you can just see how modern leaders strategically use this history. Ukrainian presidents like Yushchenko and Poroshenko, they talk about Volodymyr's choice as a European choice, the foundation of a separate Ukrainian nation and church. But Russian leaders like Medved and Putin, they talk about a shared legacy that binds everyone together, a story that always has Moscow at the center. And this isn't just talk. It has massive, real-world consequences. In the speech he gave to justify annexing Crimea in 2014, Vladimir Putin used this exact historical argument. He claimed Crimea, the place where Vladimir was supposedly baptized, as a common historical legacy that could only be Russian. That is history being used as a direct justification for military action. So, if you strip it all away, this is what you're left with. Two competing national stories, both built on the very same historical foundation. Russia's claim is all about one people, shared history. And Ukraine's claim is all about being a distinct nation that made a European choice a long, long time ago. What this really shows us is that the current conflict is so much more than a physical war fought with tanks and soldiers. It's a war of narratives. It's a war of stories, where both sides believe that whoever controls the past gets to control the future. And all of this leaves us with a pretty tough and pretty sobering final question. When the past itself is the battlefield, when the very stories that define who you are become weapons, can there ever really be a truce?